Hi everyone, Mrs. Rinker here. So today we are going to talk about D-Day, and this was the Western invasion that Stalin had been calling for really since the US first joined the war. And this is really the beginning of the end of the war in Europe. All right, so before we get into the actual day itself, let's talk a little bit more about the planning here. So by 43, FDR actually was on board. He felt that he had enough supplies, enough troops to make this invasion successful. Churchill, however, was still a little bit, shall we say, he had cold feet. Part of this was because he had actually fought in World War I and remembered how devastating that was for the British people, that long 4 years of fighting, really primarily in the north of France, which is exactly where they were headed to. Also, he felt that the U-boat presence was still a little too strong out in the Atlantic, and the Allies really needed more supplies and more equipment in order to feel secure in this invasion. So November rolls around of 1943. Stalin, FDR, and Churchill come together to meet in Tehran. And finally, Churchill actually does agree to the invasion of France. And they set a date for June 1944. Now, the bigger question I posed to you earlier this week is, was the delay necessary? And part of the reason for the delay is that everyone involved knew there would be extremely high casualty rates. And just to kind of give you some perspective on that, I have a little bit of a snippet here from a speech George Patton gave to his troops the day before, the night before rather, of D-Day to kind of, get them going. He said, "Death must not be feared. Death in time comes to all men. Yes, every man is scared in his first battle. If he says he's not, he's a liar. Some men are cowards, but they fight the same as brave men, or they get the hell slammed out of them watching men fight who are just as scared as they are. The real hero is the man who fights even though he is scared." So you can see from that little clip of the speech there that, even Patton himself, this acclaimed general, is recognizing the fact that this is not going to be easy, right? And that was on the eve of the actual invasion itself. So everyone knew it would be pretty bad. Why was it going to be bad? Well, let's think about it this way, okay? How do we get to France? Well, you can fly or you can take a boat, right, from England. Now, flying at this point in time, there was no way, they had no capabilities to get enough troops in to kind of swarm the shores and really overwhelm the German forces. So planes weren't really an option for a majority of the troops, although they did use planes to some extent to send in paratroopers in the early phase. So boats are really the only option. Well, what's tricky about crossing the English Channel in a boat is that boats are rather slow and you're crossing a big open span of water. So the enemy can see you coming from miles away, and this gives them lots of time to prepare. Now, the other part to this is that the Germans had already well prepared for a potential invasion. They kind of knew that it was coming, and so they'd really well fortified the shores with cement pillboxes to shoot artillery and rifle fire from set up various blocks to make it difficult for ships to land, all sorts of things. So it was not going to be an easy fight, and everyone knew that. All right, now to the invasion itself. Ooh, I'm going to move my little box up here a little bit so you can see that a bit better. All right, so the official name for D-Day was actually called Operation Overlord, and the supreme commander was a U.S. general, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who would later become our president. Some other important names would be General Bernard Montgomery. He was a British guy, and he was the commander of the ground forces. And General Omar Bradley, who was head of the United States First Army. The U.S. had a good chunk of the forces landing that day. So those were some important people involved. Now, the plan was pretty extensive. They did not just fly by the seat of their pants. There were 21 U.S. divisions, 26 British, Canadian, Polish divisions altogether. So you can see that the U.S. makes the majority of the forces landing there. that were set to land on about 50 miles of beach along the Normandy coast. They were gathered together with 4,400 ships and landing craft. This was the largest fleet ever launched at that time. So you can see just how much they were trying to overwhelm the shores of France and hopefully overwhelm the Germans. They were set to hit 5 different beaches that were codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. Also, and this is a really interesting little bit of history, in preparation for the invasion, they had actually created this little fake out operation called Operation Fortitude. They set up some fake headquarters in southeast England across the water from Calais, which was quite a number of miles off from the beaches that they were set to land at. And the goal of this was to make the Germans think that they were going to land at Calais and not their actual target. So to do this fake out, they actually set up a fake little station, fake headquarters. They had cardboard and wood cutout tanks. They had ships that weren't functioning, just kind of set along the shores there. And they actually had people sending out radio transmissions, broadcasting as if the base was real. And this was actually pretty effective. The Germans did have a good chunk of their forces kind of stationed closer to Calais. So that did work in the Allies' favor. Sneaky little allies making a fake base there. All right. Now on to the day itself. Move my little box back here. All right, so the date was set for June 6th, 1944. Luckily, the weather was clear enough because crossing the English Channel can be a little tricky if the weather's poor. But it was good enough that day that they were able to cross. Still not perfect. Many men got very seasick. So before they sent the boats over, rather, they sent more than 11,000 planes across to target communication and transport centers, as well as a couple key fortifications along the beaches, hoping to kind of give their troops a little bit of a leg up once they landed, right? Again, they know just how difficult this is going to be and just how high the casualties will be in this endeavor. 6:30 a.m. is when the troops first landed on French shores. Now, Utah, Gold, Juno, and Sword were only lightly opposed, so there were actually very few casualties. So you can see how all this preparation, using planes to take out targets ahead of time, as well as that fake out operation, really did do a lot of help to, make it an easier road for the Allies. Now, Omaha, by contrast, was very heavily guarded. The Germans were really well set up, so this was an extremely difficult fight. The Germans had actually dug trenches in the cliffs above the beach, as well as building those pillboxes I mentioned. So it's like a little cement bunker with a little slit cut into it, from which the Germans could fire artillery or sniper fire down to the beaches below. So they have kind of the upper hand as far as a vantage point as well, being able to look down upon the beach. There were loads of guns and mines on the beach itself, as well as barbed wire, all sorts of obstacles for the Allies. And it was really difficult to get ashore also because they had set in these giant structures to block the boats from landing all the way up onto the beach, because these landing craft, that's what they're meant to do, essentially kind of like, shove themselves, beach themselves, right? Like a whale gets beached onto the shore. So that way the troops ideally can just hop right out onto land and get straight to the fight. Well, these big structures, which you'll see in a moment in a video clip I'm about to show you, made that more difficult. So a lot of the troops were actually having to get out into the water itself. Now, by the end of the day, by the end of June 6th, despite all of the difficulties, particularly at Omaha Beach, the Allies had actually gained a position in France, which was remarkable considering the obstacles that they were facing. And within 1 month, because they had established this landing point, 1 million more troops were able to land in Normandy. So next, what I'd like to do is show you a clip from the film Saving Private Ryan. Now, before I do that, I just want to warn you. Well, first of all, I'd like to say why I'm doing this. Just to kind of give you a better idea of just how difficult it was for the Allies, U.S. as well as all the other forces involved, landing on D-Day, just how difficult the fight was. Also, this particular film, when it came out, many World War II veterans were still around, and those that saw this said it was so realistic that some of them actually had to leave the theater because it was a little overwhelming for them to kind of relive those moments. Not a little overwhelming, very overwhelming. So I will forewarn you that this is very violent, very graphic. We're just going to watch a short little bit of it, but you're welcome to, watch the rest of this clip. And I actually encourage you to watch this whole film. It's a really wonderful film if you're interested. But I'm showing you this just to give you a better idea of just the immense struggles and the hardship faced by these soldiers as they tried to get a foothold in France on D-Day, June 6th. All right, so move myself out of the way here. I'm going to fast forward just a little bit.
Clear the room! 30 seconds! Got me with you!
North side stick, starboard side stick. Move fast and clear those murder holes.
Want to see plenty of beach between men. 5 men is a juicy opportunity. 1 man's a waste of ammo.
Get the sand out of your weapons. Keep those actions clear. We'll see you on the beach.
And we'll actually stop it there. So as I said before, oops, get back into present mode. Here we go. As I mentioned before, you're more than welcome to, continue watching this or watch the entire film. It's a really well done film. Steven Spielberg, I believe it got Best Picture. Very, very good. Anyway, I hope you get a sense for the gravity of that day. Another fact from the horrors that the men saw that day is that you saw the water was turning red from blood, right, from people being shot in the water or explosions happening, and actually the water was red for a few days after this attack. So that kind of gives you a picture of just how much suffering and how many casualties were incurred that day. So hopefully you have kind of a better idea of the experiences of those veterans, especially as we just pass through Memorial Day. I encourage people to think about those things. All right, now for your assignment. Okay. So what I would like you to do now is a little bit of reading, not much. And I want you to answer these questions and kind of trying to determine for yourself, was it worth the sacrifice? Was D-Day worth the sacrifice that everyone from, the presidents and the prime ministers like FDR and Churchill to the generals themselves like Patton and Eisenhower, the sacrifice that they all really knew it would be? So your job is to read in your book page 821 to 825 and answer the following questions. 1, when did the Allies liberate Paris? 2, were there any signs that Hitler was losing support? 3, when did Germany finally surrender? 4, how long did it take, starting from D-Day, for Germany to surrender? 5, did VE Day end the war completely? What was still left to do? And 6, the big question, okay, I want you to use your answers from those questions as well as the lecture and anything else we've talked about in our unit on World War II to help you answer this question. Was D-Day worth the sacrifice? Could the war have been won without this invasion? All right, that's it for today, and I will see you all soon. Bye.